Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our monthly webinar series on character and the common good. This series is part of Virtues and Vocations, a national forum that's housed at the Center for Social Concerns at the University of Notre Dame and supported by the Kern Family Foundation. I am Suzanne Shanahan, and I direct the center. I am also the host for this series. Virtues and Vocations seeks to foster a community of practice among scholars and practitioners across disciplines who are keen to understand how best to cultivate character and moral purpose in the professions and higher education. This webinar series is one way we facilitate this conversation. Our conversation will run till about 12:40, at which point we'll open it up for Q&A. You can submit questions through the Q&A mechanism, and I'll pose them directly to our speaker. Before I jump in and introduce today's speaker, I did want to take special note of the particular moment in which we're having this conversation. As everyone knows, today is October 7th. This is the anniversary of the horrific attack on Israel and a year-long bout of suffering both in Gaza and Israel, and for many families in the United States as well. This has been a challenging time, and I think nothing could be more appropriate than our conversation today with Dr. Helene Gayle on education and democracy. I hope it helps us shed light on these challenging times. Dr. Helene D. Gayle is president of Spelman College, the #1 historically Black college or university in the country. Spelman is a global leader in the education of women of African descent and is dedicated to academic excellence in the liberal arts and sciences and the intellectual, creative, and ethical and leadership development of its students. Previously, Helen was president and CEO of the Chicago Community Trust, one of the nation's oldest and largest community foundations. Under her leadership, the trust adopted a new strategic focus on closing the racial and ethnic wealth gap in the Chicago region. An internationally recognized expert on health and humanitarian issues, as well as global and domestic economic development, Helen spent nearly a decade as president and CEO of the international humanitarian organization, CARE. Prior to that, she served as director of the HIV, TB, and reproductive health program at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She began her career at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, where she spent 20 years focusing primarily on HIV, AIDS prevention, and global health. She currently serves on several public company and nonprofit boards, including the Coca-Cola Company, Organon, Palo Alto Networks, the Brookings Institution, Center for Strategic and International Studies, New America, and ONE. She is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, Council on Foreign Relations, American Public Health Association, National Academy of Medicine, National Medical Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics. A recipient of a number of awards, Helene has authored articles on global and domestic public health issues, poverty alleviation, gender equality, and wealth equity. She has received 18 honorary degrees and holds faculty appointments at the University of Washington and Emory University. I am thrilled to welcome her to today's conversation.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
So I'm hoping we can jump right in and get a little sense of the extraordinary journey you've had across your career, this profound commitment to public service, and how you ended up at Spelman.
Yeah, so I will say first and foremost, there was no way I ever thought that my career would end up probably the culmination of my career as a college president. As you mentioned, I'm a physician by background, and I did know that um, for a lot of reasons, the family I grew up in, the importance of education, the importance of giving back to community, that for me, choosing medicine was really a choice to have a practical skill that would allow me to make a difference in people's lives. And I always wanted to do that in a way that gave back to the most people. As a individual practitioner, you take care of and make a difference in people's lives one by one. But when you focus on public health, you have an impact on communities, societies, nations, and the world. And so I went from being a individual practitioner to really thinking about, the broader issues of public health. And as I continued throughout my career, I realized that even public health has its limits in terms of how do you address the issues that make a difference in people's lives. And, we now know that what we call the social determinants of health have as much impact on the differentials that we see in health status as medical intervention. So whether you have a job, whether you live in a neighborhood where there is access to good education, a neighborhood where you have access to a grocery store that has fresh and nutritious foods, all those things that we kind of talk about as, transportation so that you can get to a job, et cetera, et cetera. All these things of where you work, live, and play also have a huge impact on your health outcomes. So, I kind of went from being an individual practitioner to then thinking about public health and then thinking about what are the drivers of health inequity. Because for me, my career has always been about how do you foster a sense of social justice and equity using health as that, kind of tool, if you will, to be able to do that. So, from the work that I had done in domestic health to how does that translate globally, um, looking at economic factors, which is what led me to the work that I did in Chicago, looking at wealth inequity. And then finally, totally, not something I had planned on, but thinking about how do you equip the next generation of young women who want to change the world. At Spelman, our tagline is making a choice to change the world. So it was really hard for me, even though I was not planning on another next job, to turn down the opportunity to shape the lives of young women who say, for them, making a choice to change the world is what motivates them. And that's why I'm at Spelman, and it's kind of why I've taken all these different turns that, weren't what I expected when I first started out as a young woman in the medical field.
There were any particular moments at which your this sort of decision and commitment to social justice emerged for you? Was this part of your upbringing? Were there particular things in your own college education that fostered that commitment?
Yeah, so clearly, the times that I grew up, the family that I had the opportunity to grow up in made a big difference. So, I'm a child of the 60s. I was child of the movements, civil rights movement, anti-apartheid, anti-colonialism. All those things were what I experienced kind of growing up as a young woman in the 60s. I also grew up in a family that really believed that we should give back to our community, and that it was very important for us to get a good education. All of my siblings, are college educated, advanced degrees, but we were also, taught to believe that we should use our education to be able to make a difference and give back. So I look at my family, my community, people that I grew up with who really inculcated that in us, that we had a responsibility to give back to our communities. And it was in the air, if you will, in the times that I was growing up, that we should look at how could we make a difference more broadly and connect ourselves with change in a way that was bigger than anything we could do as individuals. So I grew up with that sense of wanting to give back, wanting to make a difference, and feeling like I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself.
Great. As you reflect on, say, your undergraduate experience, were there things that reinforced that perspective or challenged it? Was there at any point in your trajectory that you thought, this is too hard, this is not the right path, that you had a moment of questioning?
Not at all. I was so fortunate to go to a woman's liberal arts college. So I went to Barnard College back at the time when, if you're a woman, you couldn't go to Columbia. Like so many of the early schools now that have become co-ed. Barnard was a school that really focused on how do you develop women leaders, and so it just reinforced for me the idea that I could be a change maker, that I could do something, and that as a woman, I had a real responsibility to the issues of equity and access and all those things that just reinforced what I had learned as a high school student. So yes, I have never turned back. There are times when I think uh, maybe I could have been more practical. Maybe I'd be retired by now. But at the end of the day, everything from my childhood to my college education really reinforced that sense that I had the ability to make a difference. And if I had that opportunity when many others don't, I should use that opportunity to be able to give back to my community, to people who have put a lot of faith and confidence in me. And so I felt a real responsibility to live up to that.
Great. One of the things I really loved about how you described your trajectory was this early work on health equity, how that sort of amplified to look at the question of wealth in a really multidimensional sense, and now thinking about education. Um, what kind of role do you think that HBCUs play in the higher education landscape at this moment? And what's the distinctive opportunity that you think a place like Spelman has in cultivating the next generation of leaders?
Well, Spelman is part of a network of historically Black colleges and universities. That network was set up post emancipation after a time when people of African descent, people who were enslaved, it was actually illegal to teach Black people to read and write. And so HBCUs were created to be able to give that educational opportunity. And since that time, most of HBCUs have been, were founded post emancipation. Spelman was founded in 1881. Um, Probably 10 or 20 years after HBCUs were started, partly because it's a women's college. And, even though people appreciated the importance of educating formerly enslaved persons, it took a while to accept that formerly enslaved women should also have access to education. So, I think those, our schools have had a huge impact. And if you look at statistics, we have punched well above our weight, whether it's the 80% of Black judges who all graduated from HBCUs, and you can go down the line, lawyers, doctors, et cetera. HBCUs have continued to be huge producers of the next generation of leaders, of Black and African American predominantly leaders. I'm thrilled that Spelman, which, has for 18 years has been named the #1 HBCU, but as importantly, we're also #1 when it comes to social mobility, which says we are a good return on investment. That a degree from Spelman means that you will go out there and be able to make a difference, be able to have an impact, and create the kind of social mobility that unfortunately we just are not seeing in our country anymore, where we used to always be able to say that the next generation is going to do better than the previous generation. We're not seeing that any across the board in our country, but we are seeing that with HBCUs, and we're seeing that we are real engines for social mobility and change and creating a Black middle class that will make a big difference far into the future.
So are there particular dimensions of an HBCU and or a Spelman education that you think contributes to this extraordinary success in creating leaders and promoting a flourishing Black middle class in the United States?
Yeah, so I think, it's changed with history and time. We're 140, almost 144 years old. In the very early days, HBCUs were the only option, essentially the only option for, formerly enslaved individuals, people of color, African Americans, to be able to get an education. I think today, where we continue to see our applications go up and students really wanting this experience, they're coming because they want a place in this, given our current environment, they want a place where they can go and feel like they can be their authentic selves, where they are appreciated, where people understand where they come from, understand, backgrounds and heritages, and so many of our young people are coming from environments where they have been the only smart Black girl. And, there's this phrase that a young woman told me once. It's like, I'm here at Spelman because I'm tired of being the smart Black girl. I just want to be the smart girl. I just want to be able to be myself and not have who I am and my identity be the deciding factor. And so I think young people today come to Spelman because they can exhale, if you will. They can just be themselves. They're in an environment where people believe they can achieve, where they're not always feeling that somebody is looking at me and wondering whether I can achieve. So, they're in this place where, for 4 years, they get validated for who they are, which, is what mainstream of society often feels most of the time. And it's giving them 4 years where they can do that. And as they say, we put on our armor after 4 years, we can go out there and we know we belong at any table, any place, and that we don't have to doubt whether or not we're here because people are trying to do us a favor. We know that we're here because we should be here.
Great, thank you. You talked a little bit about the motto of Spelman and the importance of making a choice to make a difference. Can you talk a little bit about why that's important to the ethos of the college?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important because, again, HBCUs are, yes, they are educational institutions that show Black excellence and, make sure that people, young Black people, have the opportunity for an excellent education that is seen from a lens that supports who they are as individuals. But I think our mission goes beyond that. It also is, how do we give back to our community? How do we make sure that we're making a difference, that our voices matter, that when we walk in a room, we're carrying our community with us, if you will. And so I think that's why this motto of a choice to change the world is so important. Our young women come, and they come because they want to be change makers. They don't only want to have a wonderful career. They want to make sure that they use their careers in a way that make a difference and give back to the communities that they came from.
This sort of oftentimes across US higher education, there's this real tension between um, having a career, supporting one's family and one's community, and making a difference in the world. Uh, is that balance one that you talk a lot about at Spelman, or are you selecting a group of people who are coming already eager to really commit themselves to change?
Well, generally speaking, young women come to Spelman because they can get an excellent education. We're in the, everybody can complain about the rankings, but, we're within the top 40 national liberal arts colleges, according to the US News and World Report rankings. So, we're one of the top 10 women's colleges in the nation. So besides being the number one HBCU, Spelman is known for its academic excellence. So young women come for that because, we get young women who were accepted at multiple Ivy League, Seven Sister elite schools and still want to come to Spelman because they know they can both get an excellent education, but also get an education that helps them think about how they give back to the world. So I don't think it's an either or. I think it really is a both and.
Great. Are there particular things that you think in this moment historically, both in the United States and the world, um, that HBCUs and HBCUs alone are offering to the higher education landscape in terms of the cultivation of this next generation of leaders?
Well, I think HBCUs, as I mentioned kind of earlier, give young people a chance to exhale. So many of our young people, some are coming from, um, homogeneous backgrounds, but most of our young people are coming from environments where they've often been the only or one of the few. And to have this environment where they see people who look like them, who, are excellent in the fields that they're in. It's great to be at a school where the computer science professors and the biology professors and some of the hard sciences that oftentimes aren't associated with Black women are there. Our innovation lab, our Center for Entrepreneurship, they get to be in a place where they're seeing Black excellence day in and day out. Um, our theater arts, so across the spectrum to see this sense of Black excellence in places where people would not necessarily expect it. And I think that's what our young people value so much, is to come to a place where that is the case, where it's not, where the norm is excellence, where the norm is that you can be both Black and excel in the whole gamut from arts to science to technology. Um, we're the number one producer of Black women who go on to get PhDs in the STEM field. That's fabulous. But that's because they, um, their professors believe that they can do that. And, so often we talk to young people who are in predominantly white institutions, young Black people who say, like, I want to be a computer science major, or I want to be a chemistry major, or I want to do, but nobody believes that I can do it. And so being in a place where people absolutely pour into you, that you have the ability to be whatever you want to be, is pretty life affirming. And it
That's,
sticks with you.
that's wonderful. Um, at Notre Dame, this year's presidential theme is what we owe. And really thinking through the kinds of responsibilities and obligations we have to one another. I wonder if you could reflect on that notion in relationship to this choice to create change that you have at Spelman in light of what today represents for the world, being October 7th, but also the fact we have an election in less than 30 days here in the United States.
Well, those are big topics. Obviously, this is a somber day in many ways. It reflects life lost, um, and it reflects a wide range of perspectives on what what this loss of life means. I think for me, any loss of life is unacceptable. And if we believe that all lives have equal value, then seeing situations like this where lives are not valued across the spectrum, um, and where we're seeing unnecessary or unnecessary, if we could figure out a peaceful solution, loss of life. So I just hope that as we face anniversaries like this, all of us dig inside of ourselves to figure out, how do we talk to each other? How do we figure out how we can, come to solutions that are really about affirming the value of life, whether it's a Palestinian life, an Israeli life, a Lebanese life. How do we come to solutions that really, make that more equal, more just, and come up with solutions that mean that we will not have to face another unnecessary situation where there's this kind of loss of life.
So I recognize this is probably unfair to ask, but I think that's a fairly challenging conversation for us to have currently in the United States. How do you foster that kind of conversation at Spelman where it's the value of life driving how students think about things and come together across different opinions and perspectives?
So, I think institutions of higher education are the absolute best places for young people to figure out, how do you have those dialogues? How can you get from being polarized? How, we've become such a divided society where we, are much more comfortable with our own echo chambers than we are reaching across and understanding other people's perspectives. So we just try to have dialogue. We try to invite our students to step back from, their own perspectives and engage in real dialogue, because we don't do that much as a country. I think we also want to make sure that, young people understand how to listen, because we're so uh, ready to give an answer before we've actually listened to the other person. We've got our statement ready before, and not really listening. So how do you actually listen to somebody else's perspective? And I think third is really, so what do you want to accomplish? Um, we all feel good about stating our positions and feeling, we emotionally get our positions out there. But at the end of the day, what do you really want to happen? And are you helping move forward an issue, or are you just emotionally satisfied by stating your perspective? And, I think the biggest thing we try to get our students to understand is that if you actually care about an issue, it's more important to listen, understand somebody else's perspective, and figure out where you can find common ground so that you can start that dialogue. You don't start dialogue from, I believe this and you believe that, and we're on opposite sides. You start a dialogue around the things that matter to both of you. Can we accept that we believe that the sanctity of human life is important? Do we believe that all lives matter equally? Is that important? And can you start from positions of agreement and then start having that dialogue if you really want to have an impact?
Um, are there particular ways that you do this at Spelman, or is this sort of part of the DNA of how you operate across the board in different forums? And
Well, we have a very active social justice program, and they work very, very closely on how to work with our students to understand how to have impact versus just, how do you state a position. So, it's part of our DNA. Spelman, like so many HBCUs, have been so involved in political movements for decades, over a century in most situations. So it's part of who we are, is to really have our students understand what's going to actually make a difference versus how do you just spout a position.
are there things that, as you look at the kind of global state of the world, that you think we need to be doing a better job in higher education in terms of educating our students to respond differently, approach differently, engage differently? I think I'm reflecting a little bit on your life of public service and commitment to public health and global health as a real response to a challenge. Are there challenges and things you think you hope that higher education will be more responsive in and around?
Well, I just think that so many young people coming out of high school today don't understand kind of the core basics of civics, if you will. How do we, how is our democracy put together? What are the branches of government? How do you think about how you can have an impact on policy? And so I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done so that our students, who, sad but true, are just not learning the basics about, how we are put together as a nation. I think those are the kinds of things that I'd like to see us put more focus on, particularly, K through 12, so that when students are at institutions of higher learning, higher ed, they actually have those fundamentals about how we're constructed as a democracy and where are the greater levers for change.
Um, Switching gears a little bit, I wonder if you could tell me, now that you're at Spelman, what's the most common advice that you give students there? If a student says,
Um, my most common advice, students who come in today, they all have in their mind exactly what they want to do. I want to major in X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to become a, you know, uh, kidney physician to cure kidney cancer, whatever. And they all come and say, tell me what I should do. What course should I take? What's the right school for me to go to? And I keep saying to people, to young people, you know, go on the journey. There was no idea. I had no idea that when I was a medical student, that I would end up being the president of a college. None of my moves would I have predicted. And I think our young people today feel like there is a prescribed path and there is an exact way that they should go about it. And I say, take life as it comes. Be willing to take some risk. Know what your values are, because that's is what has grounded me, is knowing, what do I believe? What are my values? What do I want to ultimately have impact on? And then within that framework, I've been willing to take a path that would not be considered at all traditional, but it's a path that I feel like is very, very much aligned with the reason I started out on this journey to begin with. So that's what I try to tell students is, there is no prescribed path. Know what your values are, know what your purpose is, know what your why is. And if you stick to that why and that sense of your own personal purpose and passion, there may be things that don't seem like they're taking you in the direction that you originally thought you were going in, but it will get you to where you want to be and the impact that you hope that you will have in your life.
So I love how you've described that, because I think this is one of the fundamental challenges of students in higher education right now, is this sense that they have mapped out the next 50 years of their life. Every step has been planned and orchestrated, and there's a sense that if they misstep or develop a joy somewhere else, that they can't follow it, that they can't engage it because it's not part of the predetermined plan set before they even arrived at colleges. And I know at Belmont University, they have a whole first year series called What is Your Why? At Duke, they have this What Now program for first year students to get them to reconsider these pre-planned trajectories. Are there things at Spelman that reinforce that and develop a confidence that, yeah, you can try some things and maybe they work out and maybe they don't, but they're all part of a journey that's leading you toward this choice to make a difference?
Well, I think, one of the things we try to do is to make sure that our curricular activities are linked to co-curricular activities. And I think it's those co-curricular activities that oftentimes are what help students to continue to think about their why. So you're not just a history major or just a arts, theater and performance art major, or a poli-sci major, or pre-med. You also are doing these other things in the community and working with other students to do projects that make a difference. So I think it's that recognizing the whole person and how do you bring that together so that you're not just your coursework, you are, you're having an experience that's broader than that.
Great. So the questions are teeing up, and I'm going to turn to one now. Outside of academia, what are some examples of how seniors can offer to pass along their experience and wisdom to younger people?
Well, as a senior myself, there's obviously one way of doing it. You become the college president of a college. But, I just think being involved in the community. There's the Boys and Girls Club, there's, you know, YWCA, YMCA, whatever. I mean, the sororities, fraternities. I think there's so many ways in which one can get involved in young people in the community. Just pick one, pick one that is close to your heart and do that. And with that, more things will probably open up.
Great, thank you. The next question, Dr. Gayle, what are some things you most like to do in your rare free time for yourself? I'm not sure if that exists, but and what brings you joy and fills your spirit?
Well, what I most like to do is hang out with people that I love. So yesterday, I actually have a dear, he's kind of a nephew who is a professor at Notre Dame. He and his wife and their 1-year-old baby were up here in Chicago, where I am today. And we had a ball. It was just for me, being around people that I love, and I love to cook, I love to entertain. Those are the things that give me great joy. And so I try to make sure that I get enough of that and don't shortchange that part of my life. Because for me, people are my life.
Wonderful, thank you. At various points in your comments, you noted friendship and community. Can you say a little bit more about how you see the relationship between friendship or community to achieving justice?
Well, I think they're all connected. So when I think of my friendships, um, I like to say that I want to be the same person today that I was 25 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. I mean, obviously, we all grow and change, but I don't want to keep trading up, if you will, with friends. I have the same friends today as I had when I was in high school. They are my community, and they're part of the community that I came from, and they're what keep me grounded. And so for me, it is that thread between, the people who helped to make me who I am today, who helped to ground me um, as a person, and help to remind me of why I do the things that I do. And so to me, that through line between friends, community, and my sense of being committed to equity and justice are all part of that same through line.
Would you say that this group of friends, back from high school, do they share your commitments for equity and justice?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Great.
But they also help me, I, I've had an incredible professional career where it could be easy to be distant from who I was and now who I am today. And that's very important to me because I don't think that as a leader, um, if I didn't stay grounded in where I came from, who are the people who made it possible for me to be who I am today, I don't think as a leader, I would feel the same sense of authenticity.
Great. I love that. How might college educators support free speech and open discussion while limiting hateful and offensive rhetoric on campuses? I think that's the $1 million question today.
How, say that again,
So how might college administrators
right,
support free speech and open discussion while limiting hateful and
right,
offensive rhetoric
right.
on campus?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I think I said it a bit in one of my comments, but basically, you know, college and higher education is the place for young people to understand how to listen to others, appreciate other perspectives, and um, if they want to make an impact, figure out how you do that in a way that doesn't turn others off. So you can't, for me, I don't go into a conversation saying, I've got the answer and, not even wait to hear what somebody else has to say. I think higher education is that place where people have the opportunity to say, I'm going to meet a whole range of different people. And part of my education is understanding other people's perspective and being willing to truly put yourself in that person's place and understand why. Now, my experience may be different. I may not come to that, that is not my conclusion, but understanding that individual, I understand why that's their conclusion. And I think if we can help young people to, again, as I said earlier, start from a place of commonality. We all believe that, you know, all life has equal value. And if you can start at something like that and then hear the other person's perspective, not try to like, okay, I'll listen, but I know what I want to say, but to truly listen and understand what that person, given where they came from, given their perspective, given their family situation, what have you, why is that logical? And I think if you can come at this from a place of mutual respect, I think we all end up being willing to at least appreciate why somebody comes to a different conclusion and not, a priori say there's no validity to what that person has to say.
Yeah, I think that requires a deep cultivation of moral imagination to be able to do that effectively and consistently.
Totally.
Yep, thank you. Kind of a slightly different pivot. What can pre-K to 12 schools do to promote quality education in STEM professions?
Well, I think basically get young people excited about STEM fields. Um, I particularly think about this for women. Women start out, young girls start out on equal footing, but don't always get encouraged to think about STEM fields. And, by eighth grade or so, they start dropping out and feeling like this is not for them. So I think we have to make sure that every young person is encouraged to, learn to obviously read and write, but be exposed to the broad range of STEM fields so that they have that kind of curiosity and believe that it's for them just like it is for anybody else. So, I think K through 12 has a huge role to play to not discourage young people. And in today's world where technology is going to be the driver, the enabler of change, we've got to have all young people. You may decide you want to go into the theater arts, but even performing arts today rely on technology. So I think the idea that you're either a technology person or a STEM person, or you're a fine arts or history or English person, the divide is just a false divide. And I think the more we can have people understand, young people understand how no matter what you are most interested in, understanding STEM and particularly understanding technology is going to be important across the board.
Wonderful. You mentioned both social mobility and a commitment to creating change in the world. How do you think we can encourage students to have a sense of moral purpose connected with their professional training so that they understand success excuse me, so that they can understand their success as more than financial, as contributing to justice and equity as well. So how do you balance upward mobility with commitment to creating change?
Yeah, I think that's first of all, I think it's a very individual decision. And I know, so many people who take the path, as an example, of going into a very financially successful career and then realize, all right, I have been very financially successful. Now it's my turn to give back. And I think people have to figure out how they organize their life based on what they're most interested in, their family situation, etc. But at the end of the day, I think this generation is so much more focused on how they make a difference in the world. They choose their products based on, are you good for the environment? Are you doing good things for the world? So I don't think it's an either or. I think throughout your career, you can do things that represent your values. And, nothing wrong with having financial success. It allows you to maybe give back more. And along the way, you can volunteer and you can do things and give back to your community. But, financial success also allows you to have the resources to be able to contribute in a variety of different ways. So I just think keeping that always top of mind, what's your why, what's your purpose, and no matter what's the field that you end up, how do you continue to maintain opportunities to express that why?
Okay. Next question. Wonderful conversation. How is Spelman handling AI education and using AI for the good?
Well, like everybody, we're just at the infancy. AI is, especially, generative AI is like moving at warp speed. So we're, like everybody else, we're trying to figure out, how do you make this a tool for good and not a tool that has negative consequences. So we're looking at it from, the standpoint of us as an institution. How can it make us more efficient? How can it be, how can we do some of our core work in ways that free up people's time and make us more efficient? On the, kind of educational side, how can that change our pedagogy? We know students are using AI. So as opposed to forbidding it, how do you work with students to say, in education is an opportunity for you to think deeply about an issue. You don't want AI doing the work for you, because when you leave here, you will not have had the opportunity for the kind of original thinking. Do your first draft with AI, but ask the questions because you had the original thinking about the thesis that you want to explore. So I just think more and more we're thinking about, how do you make sure that AI is being used as a tool versus how are we thinking of it in a negative, and how we're making sure that our students particularly, and our, our faculty, everybody who's involved with the endeavor of education, are thinking about it from the ways in which it can be a enabler, but not take away from original thinking.
Great. Throughout your career, you've dedicated extraordinary energy to supporting women and girls. Why does equity hinge on justice for women and girls?
Well, no matter what statistic you look at, whether it's health, whether it's economic opportunity, educational opportunity, women and girls are disproportionately impacted by lack of education, lack of economic opportunity, poor health outcomes, etc. So just from a numeric standpoint, if you make a difference in the lives of women and girls, you're going to have the greatest impact on communities and populations. But there's also a fairness and a justice issue related to that. Clearly, having women and girls have the same opportunities as boys and men will make us a more just and a more equitable society and a more equitable world. If you put women at the table, they will raise issues that men won't raise. They will help broaden how we see our responsibility to our societies because we're having different voices at the table. So it's both a numeric issue. If, you know, as an epidemiologist, you look at who's disproportionately impacted. So girls and women are disproportionately impacted by bad things. If you change that, all of us, will be better off. But it's also a fairness and a justice issue that if girls and women are at the table, they will also help us have the kinds of voices and answer the kinds of issues that, again, make us a better society.
Great. Given your background in public health, what do you think are the most pressing public health challenges today?
Well, I think clearly new and emerging infectious diseases. We had a pandemic that shut the whole world down, which caused a major impact on our economy. And I think it's not the last time. So we know that we are going to continue to have emerging infectious diseases that know no boundaries and that can have widespread impact like we saw with the COVID pandemic. But I also think we have to think about the non-communicable diseases. The fact that diabetes and heart disease are both in this country as well as around the world, increasingly, in cancer, increasingly are causing the bulk of deaths in our world. So I think we have to be able to look at both the fact that we will continue to have emerging infectious threats, but that there are also issues like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, where we could spend more of our resources around prevention that could make a huge difference in the future. And I think there's more that we need to do to focus on that.
Great, thank you. As one final question, I just wonder if you could share something that you're very hopeful about at this moment.
Well,
hope?
I walk out my door every day. I live on campus at Spelman, and I walk out my door every day and see, these 2,000 plus, 2,500 plus incredibly bright young women who all believe they can change the world. It doesn't get any better than that. So that's what I'm the most hopeful about.
Yeah, certainly inspiring to see that every day. Well, with that, I would like to thank you all for spending your lunch hour with us and Dr. Helene Gayle. Please join us again on Monday, November 4th at noon for a very special session on generosity in medicine with two physicians, Dr. Sneha Mantri and Dr. Abraham Nussbaum. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us today. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thanks so much.